Welcome to Study Loop.
Okay, so for this question, it's another basic vocabulary and understanding the concepts presented in this chapter type of question. So for this one, let's just go ahead and run through all of the options we have and see which ones, based mainly on, the terminology given in and of itself, uh, to figure out which one uses mathematical equations in order to, excuse me, model systems in ecology and can be used for studying ecosystems. So let's just run down the line and start with what seems to make the most logical sense for this question, which is analytical modeling. So analytical modeling makes it sound like you're doing analysis. You're running some sort of analytical model. Analytical model. It's in the name. And actually, in this case, this is the type of modeling that uses mathematical and statistical equations and functions in order to model and predict how different changes in different variables will affect ecosystems. So, for instance, um, let's say if you want to see how changes in rain and precipitation levels can impact net primary productivity at a certain rate, then you might use an analytical model that has been generated based on prior data. Um, so this seems to be our correct answer right off the bat, A. But before we fully check this off, let's take a look at our other options and just make sure we're not missing anything. So after this, we have our simulation modeling. And just based solely on the name, we have simulation. That implies something virtual, maybe modeled in a computer, something that's like done via a program or something that's like not the thing in and of itself, but a mirror of that thing. And in fact, that is what simulation modeling is. Simulation modeling is basically using a computer program and kind of like a more complex analytical model to recreate the ecosystem as a computer program that you can input various variables and data and change them to see how um, the ecosystem might change in the future given different changes in external or internal factors. Um, so that is not the answer that we're looking for right here. And next up, we have conceptual modeling. And again, break it down. Conceptual, it's a concept. Um, Conceptual modeling actually happens outside of ecosystems, and you might have heard this term referred to in various English classes as flowcharts, because that's one example of a conceptual model. These are basically models that are made to express concepts and communicate at like sort of a broader level what's happening in an ecosystem. For instance, like a food chart is like a fairly basic conceptual model. Like in this case, we have in this ecosystem, let's say we have our variety of plants, our primary producers, and those are fed upon by herbivores. In this case, we have a cow. And this cow is also fed upon by humans and wolves. And humans are also omnivores, so they also eat the plants as well. That is what this conceptual model tells us. But no math really happening here. Um, so not exactly what we're looking for. Uh, and finally, we have microcosm modeling. And micro means small. So it's basically like a tiny version of the thing itself that you're studying or an ecosystem. And basically, microcosm modeling is when an ecosystem is recreated in some fashion in a laboratory setting or somewhere artificial that way someone like the ecologist can actually study and experiment on different variables in the ecosystem. So in this case, here in this lab, there has been a recreation of a sort of a desert ecosystem, and it might be set off in some enclosure, so that way there can be like temperature and precipitation control. You might also be familiar with the concept of a terrarium. That's another sort of example of a microcosm that's often used in like a middle school or high school biology class. Um, and again, no math really happening here. And even though there is like math happening in the simulation model, obviously, and via the computer program, it's vastly different than just the mathematical, like linear equations themselves. Um, because that is what the analytical model is looking at, sort of the linear aspects of this ecosystem. And in fact, that is what our question is asking. So our final answer is in fact A.